Captain Marcus Webb never expected to find anyone alive on Kepler for to be, much less 5 pairs of desperate eyes staring at him through the cracked viewport of a crashed vessel. The distress beacon had been silent for 3 weeks, which in salvage terms meant whatever waited inside was either dead or worthless. Yet here he was, boots crunching against crimson sand, staring at 5 faces pressed against the frost-covered glass, and one of them, the one with silver hair cascading past her shoulders and luminescent skin that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, mouthed words that made his heart stop. Save me. Take me with you. Marcus had been alone for 6 months, running freight routes through the outer colonies, and the sound of his own voice had become his only company. So when he pried open the airlock and heard her actual voice, soft but urgent, repeating those same words aloud, something inside his chest tightened in a way he couldn't quite explain. The 5 of them stumbled out into the thin atmosphere, each wearing fitted tactical suits in various states of disrepair, their pointed ears, the only thing marking them as non-human. And the silver-haired one, who introduced herself as Lyria, gripped his arm with surprising strength and said, "Please, you have to take us before they come back." Marcus glanced at his small cargo ship, the Wanderer, designed for 1 person and modest freight, definitely not for 6 passengers, and his practical mind screamed this was a terrible idea. But the fear in her crystalline blue eyes overrode every logical objection his brain could muster. "Who's coming back?" Marcus asked, already inputting the emergency startup sequence on his wrist console, and Lyria's expression darkened as she looked toward the rust-colored sky where twin moons hung like watching eyes. "The collectors," she whispered, "and the other for girls, ranging from what appeared to be late teens to mid-20s, each with the same pointed ears and luminescent skin, but different hair colors from platinum blonde to deep violet," visibly shuddered at the name. Marcus had heard rumors about collectors, slavers who operated in the lawless frontier zones, buying and selling sentient beings to the highest bidder, and the thought made his blood run cold, even as his ship's engines hummed to life. "Everyone inside now," he commanded, surprised by the authority in his own voice, and they didn't hesitate, filing into the Wanderer's cramped interior while Marcus did a final scan of the horizon, half expecting to see ships descending, but finding only empty sky and the skeletal remains of their crashed vessel slowly being buried by the endless red sand. Once aboard, Marcus initiated the launch sequence, and the Wanderer lifted off with a groan of protest, carrying far more weight than she was designed for, while the 5 girls crowded into the cargo hold that Marcus hastily converted into temporary living space by throwing down emergency blankets and activating the environmental controls. As the planet shrank beneath them, and the black velvet of space embraced his ship, Marcus finally exhaled, but Lyria appeared in the cockpit doorway, her presence somehow filling the small space with an energy he couldn't name, and she said quietly, "Thank you. I know you didn't have to stop. Couldn't leave you there," Marcus replied, keeping his eyes on the navigation charts, plotting a course away from the frontier and toward the safer core systems. Though that journey would take weeks, and he had no idea how he'd feed 6 people on rations meant for 1. Lyria moved closer, her footsteps barely making sound against the metal floor, and he caught the faint scent of something like jasmine mixed with ozone, distinctly alien, yet oddly pleasant. "You're wondering why we were there," she said. And it wasn't a question, so Marcus nodded, adjusting the ship's trajectory to avoid a debris field that his sensors painted an angry red across the display. Lyria settled into the co-pilot's chair, her movements graceful despite the obvious exhaustion etched into her features, and she began to speak in a voice that carried the weight of someone who'd seen too much too soon. "We were being transported, me and my sisters, not by blood, but by bond, from our homeworld Etheria to a mining colony in the Scorpius sector, sold by our own government to pay off planetary debt. Except our transport crashed here during a navigation error, and the crew abandoned us, taking the only working escape pod and leaving us with a dying ship and no way to call for help, until you showed up 3 days after our beacon finally activated." The casual cruelty of her words, delivered in such a matter-of-fact tone, made Marcus's hands tighten on the controls, and he found himself angry at people he'd never met, at systems that treated lives as currency, at the unfairness of a universe that could be so beautiful and so cruel simultaneously. "You're safe now," Marcus said, though he knew the promise was fragile. His ship was unarmed, slow, and now severely overloaded. Easy prey for anyone who decided to take an interest, but Lyria smiled. A genuine expression that transformed her face from merely beautiful to something that made his heart skip irregularly. I believe you, she replied, and the trust in those 3 words felt heavier than any cargo he'd ever hauled. Over the following days, Marcus discovered that his 5 passengers were far more than refugees seeking safety. Each possessed unique abilities inherent to their species that they revealed gradually, almost shyly. Lyria, he learned, could sense emotional states, reading the subtle bioelectric fields that all living beings produced, which explained how she always seemed to know when he was worried or tired before he showed outward signs. Kira, the youngest with platinum blonde hair, could manipulate light, bending it to create illusions or focusing it into tools, demonstrated when she repaired a faulty circuit board using only concentrated photons shaped by her fingertips. Nessa, whose deep violet hair matched her mysterious personality, possessed perfect memory, able to recall every moment of her life in crystalline detail, making her an encyclopedia of Etherian culture and history. Thalia and Zara, who appeared to be twins, though Lyria explained they were simply born on the same day in the same district, could harmonize their thoughts, communicating telepathically and coordinating actions with supernatural precision, which they demonstrated by simultaneously organizing the cargo hold into an efficient living space without speaking a single word. Despite these remarkable abilities, what struck Marcus most during those early days wasn't their alien nature, but how fundamentally relatable they were. Lyria hummed while she worked, helping him recalibrate the navigation systems with surprising technical skill. Kira laughed at his terrible jokes, the kind of genuine laughter that made him want to be funnier. And the others gradually opened up, sharing stories of their homeworld with its crystal cities and singing forests. Places that sounded like fantasy but were delivered with such specific detail that Marcus found himself believing every word. On the 5th night, while the others slept in the cargo hold, Lyria joined Marcus in the cockpit during his watch shift, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars streak past and faster than light travel, creating ribbons of light against the darkness. "Can I ask you something personal?" Lyria said eventually, her voice barely above a whisper, and Marcus nodded, surprised to find he wanted to answer whatever she asked. "Why are you out here alone? Humans are social creatures. I've read about your species, yet you choose solitude in the most isolated routes in known space. Why?" The question landed like a physical thing, and Marcus considered deflecting, making a joke, changing the subject. But something about the way Lyria looked at him, without judgment, only curiosity, and what might have been concern, made him answer truthfully. "I lost my crew 3 years ago," Marcus heard himself say, the words coming easier than they had in countless therapy sessions. "Solar flare caught us off guard near Proxima Station. I was in the shielded cargo bay doing inventory. They were on the bridge. By the time the radiation cleared, all 4 of them were gone, and I was alive, sole survivor. And I couldn't figure out why the universe decided I deserved to live when better people died. So I took the insurance payout, bought the ship, and I've been running solo routes ever since. Because if I'm alone, I can't fail anyone else, can't lose anyone else, can't be the one who survives again." Silence filled the cockpit after his confession, and Marcus immediately regretted the emotional outburst. But then he felt Lyria's hand cover his on the armrest, her touch warm and solid and real. And she said something that cracked the armor he'd built around himself. "You didn't survive by accident, Marcus. You survived because you're strong enough to carry the weight. And maybe you were meant to be here, right now, for us. Did you consider that?" He looked at her then, really looked, and saw not the alien refugee or the beautiful stranger, but someone who understood loss, who carried her own weight, and who somehow saw something in him worth saving too. "I'm glad I found you," he said simply, and her smile in response was brighter than any star outside his viewport. Everything changed on the 7th day when proximity alarms shrieked through the ship, tearing Marcus from sleep and sending him sprinting to the cockpit, where displays showed 3 vessels in pursuit, their signatures matching known collector ships, fast, heavily armed, and closing distance rapidly. Lyria was already in the co-pilot seat, her face pale but determined, and she said what Marcus already knew. "They found us." The other girls crowded into the cockpit, fear evident in their expressions, but also resolution. And Marcus made a split-second decision that would either save them all or doom them together. "Hold on," he commanded, killing the primary engines and firing maneuvering thrusters in a pattern that sent the Wanderer into a spiraling dive toward a nearby asteroid field. A maneuver that would either lose their pursuers in the chaos of tumbling rocks or turn his ship into debris. And he honestly wasn't sure which outcome was more likely. The collectors followed, their larger ships, more powerful but less maneuverable. And Marcus threaded his ship through gaps that his sensors insisted were too small, trusting instinct and desperation in equal measure, while Lyria called out distances and Kira, without being asked, began manipulating the external lights, creating false images of the Wanderer in multiple locations, confusing the pursuit's targeting systems. An energy blast seared past the hull, close enough that Marcus heard the metal groan, and Thalia gripped Zara's hand. The twins, closing their eyes in concentration, and suddenly Marcus actually knew with certainty he couldn't explain, exactly where each pursuing ship would be 3 seconds in the future. Their shared consciousness somehow feeding probability calculations directly into his mind. He dodged left before the enemy fired right, dove under a rotating asteroid before they attempted to flush him over it, and executed a flip turn that basic physics said should tear his ship apart, but somehow held together. And gradually, impossibly, the distance between hunter and prey began to increase. Marcus spotted a cave system, a massive hollow asteroid with multiple tunnels, and he plunged into the darkness, killing all external lights and going silent, floating dead in space while the collectors searched, their powerful beams sweeping past the cave entrance multiple times, but never quite finding the right angle to spot the Wanderer pressed against the interior wall like a frightened animal hiding from predators. Hours passed in absolute silence, no one daring to speak or even breathe loudly, and Marcus felt Lyria's hand find his in the darkness, squeezing gently, offering comfort and drawing strength in equal measure. Finally, mercifully, the enemy's signatures retreated, apparently deciding the prey had escaped or wasn't worth the continued search. And when Marcus finally restarted his engines, the sound seemed obscenely loud in the cave's confines. "Everyone okay?" he asked, receiving shaky confirmations from all 5 girls. And as he carefully navigated out of the asteroid field, plotting a new course through even more remote space lanes, he realized something fundamental had shifted. These weren't passengers anymore, weren't refugees he was transporting to safety. They were his crew, his responsibility, and maybe, if he was honest, his family. The remaining journey to the core systems took another 2 weeks. And during that time, Marcus watched his ship transform from a lonely freight hauler into something resembling a home. The girls decorated the cargo hold with light sculptures Kira created. Nessa shared stories every evening, recounting Etherean legends from her perfect memory with the skill of a born storyteller. Thalia and Zara figured out how to coax better performance from the aging engines through their synchronized technical work. And Lyria, she became Marcus's constant companion, sitting with him during long watch shifts, debating philosophy and swapping stories, learning his moods and quirks while revealing her own. Like how she was terrified of enclosed spaces, which made her calm during the asteroid cave incident all the more remarkable. Or how she dreamed of becoming a teacher, sharing knowledge with younglings, a dream that had been stolen when her government decided citizens were sellable assets. One night, approximately 3 days from reaching the safe haven of New Geneva Station, Marcus and Lyria stood in the small observation bubble, a transparent dome extending from the ship's underside that provided an unobstructed view of the cosmos. And he finally asked the question that had been building in his mind. "What will you do when we arrive? You and the others, you're free now. The core systems don't recognize debt slavery contracts. You can go anywhere, be anyone." Lyria was quiet for a long moment, her luminescent skin casting a soft glow in the darkened bubble. And when she spoke, her voice carried an uncertainty that Marcus had never heard from her before. "I don't know," she admitted. "For so long, every decision was made for me. Where to live, what to learn, who to be. And now I have infinite choices and no idea how to choose. It's terrifying and wonderful simultaneously." Marcus understood that feeling, the paralysis of possibility, and he spoke before his cautious nature could stop him. "You could stay," he said quietly. "All of you, I mean. The Wanderer's not big, but we've made it work. And there's always demand for freight services, more so with a skilled crew. And I've been alone for 3 years, and these past few weeks, having people aboard, having you here, I've remembered what I was missing. What I gave up when I chose isolation. He forced himself to look at Lyria, to meet her eyes that seemed to hold entire galaxies in their depths, and he saw his own hope reflected there, fragile but real. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Lyria asked, moving closer, and Marcus nodded, feeling more vulnerable than he had facing the collectors. I'm saying I want you to stay. Want all of you to stay, but especially you. Because somewhere between that red planet and here, you became important to me, more important than I probably should admit. And the thought of saying goodbye at New Geneva feels wrong in a way I can't articulate. Lyria's hand rose to his cheek, her touch gentle, and she smiled with an emotion so profound that Marcus felt his own eyes sting. Marcus Webb, do you know what Ethereans value most? She asked, and he shook his head. So she continued, connection, genuine bond between souls. We can live for centuries, but most go their entire lives without finding someone who truly sees them. Yet you, a human who picked up 5 desperate strangers, you see me, not my abilities, not my species, but me. And I haven't felt this, seen, this valued ever. Is that a yes? Marcus asked, hardly daring to hope, and Lyria laughed, the sound like music in the confined space, before she answered in a way that left no doubt. She kissed him, a gentle press of lips that spoke of new beginnings and chosen family and the kind of connection that transcends species or circumstance. And when they finally pulled apart, both smiling like idiots, she whispered, that's a yes. We'll stay. I'll stay. If you'll have us. Have me. Marcus pulled her into an embrace, holding this extraordinary woman who had somehow brought light back into his carefully darkened world. And he made a promise. I'll spend every day proving that stopping on that red planet was the best decision I ever made, he said. And Lyria held him tighter, her luminescent glow brightening slightly, a physiological response to strong emotion that he'd learned to recognize. And they stood there, 2 souls from different worlds who had found each other in the vast emptiness of space. And somehow that felt like the most natural thing in the universe. When they finally returned to the cargo hold, they found the other 4 girls awake and grinning with knowing expressions, and Kira said cheerfully, about time. We've been running a betting pool on when you 2 would figure it out. Marcus felt his face heat with embarrassment, but Lyria just laughed and asked who won, and Nessa raised her hand proudly, stating she'd predicted this exact day and time, which nobody could argue with, given her perfect memory. And the teasing that followed felt warm and familial and exactly right. New Geneva Station appeared on their scopes like a city of lights against the velvet black, a massive orbital habitat housing to million souls from 100 different species. And as the Wanderer received docking clearance, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. This was the end of one journey, but clearly the beginning of another. The station's immigration officers processed the girls as refugees, granting them immediate asylum and citizenship in the Federation of Free Worlds, invalidating any claims the Etherean government might make. And the relief on all 5 faces was palpable. They were truly free, truly safe, and truly able to make their own choices for the first time in their lives. Marcus registered them as his crew, a process that raised some eyebrows given his long-standing solo status. But the efficiency with which they'd operated during the collector chase was well documented in his ship's logs, and the applications were approved without significant issue. Over the following weeks, the Wanderer underwent renovations, expanding the crew quarters, upgrading systems that had been neglected during Marcus's isolation years, and transforming from a lonely transport into a proper home for 6. And Marcus found himself smiling more, laughing genuinely, and looking forward to each day in a way he hadn't since losing his original crew. Lyria stood beside him through it all, her presence a constant source of strength and joy. And while they took things slowly, respectful of the newness of everything, the connection between them deepened daily, built on mutual respect, shared experiences, and the kind of understanding that can't be forced, only discovered. 4 months after that fateful meeting on Kepler for to be, the Wanderer departed New Geneva on her first official run with a full crew, hauling medical supplies to a colony in the Andromeda Relay. And as Marcus sat in the captain's chair, with Lyria beside him, Kira, managing communications with uncontained enthusiasm, Nessa navigating using her flawless memory of star charts, and Thalia and Zara coordinating the engine performance with supernatural precision, he realized something profound. He'd spent 3 years running from loss, convinced that isolation was safety, that detachment was survival. But 5 desperate voices saying, "Save me, take me with you," had shattered that illusion and shown him a better truth. That connection was worth the risk, that family wasn't just blood or even species. It was choice and commitment and showing up for each other even when the universe got scary. "What are you thinking about?" Lyria asked softly, her emotional sensing probably already giving her a good idea, but wanting to hear him say it anyway, and Marcus smiled, reaching over to take her hand while keeping his other on the controls. "I'm thinking that getting that distress beacon was the luckiest moment of my life," he said, honestly. "And I'm thinking that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, with exactly the people I'm supposed to be with." Lyria's luminescent glow brightened, that telltale sign of deep emotion, and she leaned her head against his shoulder briefly before sitting up as a new course heading appeared on their screens. "Then let's see where this journey takes us, Captain," she said, with a grin. And Marcus engaged the faster-than-light drive, sending the Wanderer and her crew of 6 into the star-streaked unknown, no longer running from the past, but racing toward a future they would build together. One choice, one journey, one connection at a time. And somewhere in his heart, in a place that had been cold and dark for 3 long years, warmth and light had finally returned, brought by 5 alien girls who'd needed saving, but had somehow saved him instead.